Packers are now reeling after a 31-26 NFC Championship loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We will wrap up, hit on some big keys to this game, plus we will also take some of your questions over on Facebook in just a moment. So make sure if you have any of those thoughts, head on down to the chat. Ryan and I, as always, we want to hear from you. We know you have a lot on your mind, whether it's about the game itself, looking ahead to the future. Ryan and I would love to hear some of your thoughts, and we'll get to them toward the end of our conversation today. The Packers haven't had a shot at an NFC Championship game since 2007 at home here at Lambeau Field. They finally were able to have one, and it ended in a heartbreaking way. Ryan, how did this NFC Championship game compare to some of the other ones that were on the road?
The thing that I walk away with is just the psychological damage of, in Seattle in 14, in Atlanta in 16, in San Francisco last year, they could say, yeah, but. They lost, just like today, yeah, but just get one of these at Lambeau Field. Just get it at home. Get it on the tundra. And they got that today, and they lost again. So when that's, for years now, that's what this team internally has been thinking. Just get it at home. They get it at home, and they still lose. Of the four NFC Championship game losses in 7 years is brutal. It's not Buffalo Bills early 90s brutal, but that is brutal. It's a brutal stretch, and this is by far the most – it's got to be – it stings a little different. I mean, I don't know if anything's ever going to replace that 2014 collapse in Seattle, but this stings in a different way for this team because they actually had it at home. They had it at Lambeau. They got what they wanted. They didn't get to where they wanted to get to.
There are a lot of opportunities that the Packers are going to want back after the fact, and let's hit on one big one. In the fourth quarter, the Packers had 3 shots in the end zone in a goal-to-go scenario. They weren't able to capitalize on all of them, all 3 passing plays, one to Allen Lazard, one to wide receiver Davante Adams, another one to Davante Adams. On 4th down, head coach Matt LaFleurs decides to kick a field goal, takes the 3 points, does not take another shot at the end zone. What was the thought process behind that decision?
Well, I don't know about you, I was shocked. And it was swift. There was no hesitation from the sideline. Immediately after the play, the field goal unit was coming onto the field. Aaron Rodgers alluded to that, how quickly it was after the game. The thought process was this, according to Matt LaFleurs, and this is the first question I asked him after the game. He said that, one, the two-point conversion, getting the field goal, not needing a 2-point conversion, he thought would be big. But it came down to the timeouts. He knew that they'd get the 2-minute warning and that they had 3 timeouts, so he felt like having 4 timeouts, essentially, 4 clock stoppages, and with the way the defense had been battling in the second half, and the defense had played very, very well in the second half, played not so well in the first half, but all the defense had given up in that second half was a short field touchdown early in the third quarter, coming off of the Aaron Jones fumble. He felt like the way the defense was playing, the timeouts, not needing to have the 2-point conversion against the Bucs defense that played very well inside the 10-yard line, it was that's why the decision was made. With that said, he took the ball out of his MVP's hands. He took the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands instead of going for 8 yards. It's just, Matt LaFleur said in hindsight he regrets it. It was a poor decision. It was a poor decision to do.
This wasn't the only what-if of the game. There are a number of opportunities. We could stand here for a very long time and point different things out. Safety Will Redmond had a prime opportunity for an interception on Tom Brady's touchdown drive toward the end of the first half that ultimately put the Bucs up a substantial number of points. Wide receiver Davante Adams dropped a ball in the end zone. That was another 6 points that the Packers could have had that they ultimately didn't. What good are those what-ifs?
Well, they're not good for anything, obviously. I think a big what if, it's set really poorly with this team to see the call, the DPI on Kevin King at the end of the game. And you know what? Look, you freeze the frame. He tugged the jersey. There's no question that he tugged the jersey. But watching that play live, it just went against the grain of how the entire game was played. And if you know me, I'm not someone. I mean, I get agitated all the time at fans saying, "Well, look at the penalty," because the reality. And this is a great example of Kevin King. Kevin King gave up 2 touchdowns in the first half. One, he missed time to jump on the opening drive to Mike Evans. That's a really poor mistiming of his leap. And then what he was doing at the end of the first half, who knows? I mean, he was obviously trying to take away the field goal range, but you got to protect the big play first at all times, and he didn't. So Kevin King was a pretty big culprit today, but that, Aaron Rodgers said it after the game himself. It was a bad call. That did not sit well with this team, and frankly, I understand why. Even if by letter of the law there was, for a millisecond, you freeze the frame, there's a tug on the jersey. There are a lot of tugs on jerseys today.
A lot of you want to have discussions in the comments right now about the future of this team and what is next for this team. How are they going to operate in the offseason? Which players are coming back? Which coaches are coming back? Which coaches aren't coming back? And we'll get to all of that. I want to start with quarterback Aaron Rodgers first, because he made some comments after the game discussing the uncertain future about this team. And there is some uncertainty about this future. Plenty of players become free agents in 2021. Center Corey Linsley, running back Aaron Jones, cornerback Kevin King, just to name 3 of them. What did you make of what Rodgers had to say following the game?
I thought it sounded like a quarterback who was, one, in his own words, gutted. And he knew that his best chance, the thing that he's wanted for years, this game here, his best chance at a Super Bowl was just ripped away. And I think that he's also, look, Aaron Rodgers is a really smart guy. He's a cerebral guy. He's aware of the cap situation next year. He knows it's dipping $20 million and that the Packers have some really tough decisions to make. I don't think it's a coincidence that he pointed out guys like Mercedes Lewis specifically. Mercedes Lewis, what he does in that locker room and as a blocking tight end, very valuable piece. Tough luxury to have a blocking tight end with the cap situation. He very well could be a guy that they don't bring back just because of that. Bigger guys than that, though. Aaron Jones, Corey Linsley, Kevin King. This is a team, and I think Aaron Rodgers knows this, that is going to have to make some really difficult decisions that's going to likely lessen the product on the field, lessen the roster. They're not the only team in the league going to have to do that. I did not hear a guy saying, I'm not coming back next year. And I who knows at this point? It's very fresh, but that's not what I heard. I don't know, Olivia, if that's what you heard, but I go back to Chicago in the season finale. Aaron Rodgers, after clinching the 1 seed, was asked, does this, the jubilation, the celebration, does it change your thoughts on the future? And he said, no, it doesn't. He knows that his time's running out. He knows that he's not going to get another shot quite like this and that nothing's guaranteed like this. So it was, the fact that he was thankful and reflective. He's been thankful and reflective all year. He sounded different today, but he sounded different all year. It was very much in line with the tone that he's had all season. I did not hear Aaron Rodgers is not coming back. That's just not what I heard.
Let's continue this conversation on Facebook right now. Let's first go back to the game. Timmy wants to know why the Packers got away from the run game on offense. Is it because Aaron Jones had a couple of fumbles? Why did LaFleurs take the foot off the gas in the run game?
Matt LaFleurs talked about this after the game. They ditched the game plan. What does this offense do so well all season? They run to set up the pass. Aaron Rodgers set a record today for most completions ever for a Packers quarterback in a playoff game. That is not the record they wanted to set today. Not at all. It was for an offense that has thrived on balance all year. They were very imbalanced today, and Matt LaFleurs said that a lot of the red zone issues that they had, he thought were a byproduct of going with too many dropbacks, getting away from the run game that sets up the action pass game, and just going with drop back. It was almost kind of like what you would expect Mike McCarthy to do, with just falling in love with the drop back and having Rodgers sling it around the field. That's not what got this offense here. And I think Matt LaFleurs was conciliatory after the game, and he just what I heard. He seemed like a coach that was second guessing himself quite a bit. And you can understand why, because they got away from the game plan and got away from what this offense does well against a Bucs defense that, yes, takes away the run. They had an 18-point deficit, but there was a lot of time left. They got away from what their strength was.
After the game, LaFleurs said he wasn't on his A game and that he was disappointed that he let so many people down in today's game. Yeah. Let's take another question here. We'll go over to Gerard over on Facebook. Gerard said that Kevin King is the 2020 version of Brandon Bostic and needs to be rid of the Packers. As we've mentioned, King becomes a free agent in March. What does his future look like with the Green Bay Packers?
Well, it's not Brandon Bostic. not a signature play that, swung the game. Even the call, I think, was a questionable call. The touchdowns he gave up in the first half were a lot more on Kevin King. But with that said, Kevin King's always been this way. He oscillates between making big plays and giving them up. It's been what he's done his entire career. He will, and I know you don't want to hear this, he will make big plays. Kevin King makes big plays. There are moments that he has good coverage against top guys in the league. And then there's moments when he mistimes a jump by a half second. I mean, it just unfathomably mistimed and gives up a touchdown. And today he was on the wrong end of that frequently. And it was a big part of this game. Make nothing else you say about it. So, bottom line, Kevin King did not have the season that he wanted going into free agency. He only played 11 games, played 15 last year, had 5 picks last year, no picks this year. And then today, not how he wanted to go into free agency. And in this market, in this climate, with the cap going down, COVID, it's going to be a tough spring for him.
Thanks so much for your question. We appreciate it. Let us go over to, Andrew says that he's depressed and that he needs a beer. Antoine, meanwhile, says that the Packers need another receiver still. The Packers did not draft a receiver in the draft this past year, and they were very confident in wide receiver Equinemius St. Brown, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Alan Lazard, taking the next step under head coach Matt LaFleurs in this offense. Where do the Packers stand right now in terms of a need for a receiver?
It's a need, but MVS had a heck of a day today. 4 catches, 115 yards. He was so sure-handed. I think the Packers have to really be thrilled with MVS going into next season. What they missed offensively today was not a receiver. It was their all-pro left tackle. That's what they missed offensively. At some point, David Bakhtiari's absence was going to be felt. I mean, they lose him Thursday of Week 17 and drop 35 on the Chicago Bears. They have 2 weeks to prepare for the Rams and Aaron Donald, who obviously wasn't full strength, but they dropped 32 points on that defense. It wasn't just going to be automatic smooth sailing without David Bakhtiari. You don't just lose David Bakhtiari and, no big deal. It's a big deal when you lose an all-pro left tackle. Today was a very big deal. 5 sacks, 8 quarterback hits. The pressure got to them even more than Week 6, and it was coming from the edges. It was coming from where David Bakhtiari would have lined up. Billy Turner's done yeoman's work as a left tackle. He's not a left tackle. He's a right tackle, really good right guard. He's not a left tackle. Rick Wagner was a depth piece that they signed. Not expected to start, perhaps, in an NFC championship game. He's both those guys done yeoman's work for weeks now, but against Jason Pierre-Paul, Shaq Barrett, this defensive front, big difference. They missed David Bakhtiari.
Let's continue the conversation about the draft, free agency, with a question here from Eric. Eric wants to know, with all of the uncertainties with the offseason, the cap going down in 2021, can you see running back Aaron Jones playing with the team in 2021? What does Jones' future look like here in Green Bay?
With a tag, perhaps. I don't know if a long-term deal gets done. This goes back to why I thought Aaron Rodgers sounded the way he did today. I think that he knows it's going to be difficult, if not unlikely, for Aaron Jones to come back. And what did you see when Aaron Jones left the field? I know that they had a couple touchdown drives in the third quarter, but when they didn't have Aaron Jones late, that takes a huge element away from their offense. Huge element. So, again, I think that's a prime example of a guy that, hey, in a normal cap year without COVID, without a pandemic, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, you bring back Aaron Jones. There's no no-brainers this year. It's the economic environment that every league is in, but especially this league with the cap going down.
Let's see what else we got here over on Facebook. Jason thinks that Kevin King is gone, not sold on keeping Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Jamal Williams, or Aaron Jones. Jamal Williams is also a free agent in 2021. Let's see what else we got here. Riva agrees with you, Ryan. David Bakhtiari's absence hurt the Packers. Kenneth over on Facebook says, Preston Smith gone, Kevin King gone, Aaron Jones gone. A lot of you have crystal balls there at home. And then Kenneth also says, please, defensive coordinator Mike Pettin should be gone. Where does defensive coordinator Mike Pettin currently stand with the Packers organization?
It's a great question. I imagine Matt LaFleurs might be asked that tomorrow. it's easy to say, oh, Mike Pettin, that defense is just terrible. They gave up 31 points. 7 of those were on short field, and that was all that they really gave up in that second half. It would be, I think, more difficult. It's already difficult to excuse Matt LaFleur's decision to kick the field goal on 4th and goal from the 8. I think it would be more difficult even to excuse that decision if he has so little faith in his defensive coordinator that he's going to fire him after this season. You don't do that with a guy that you don't have faith in. So, I mean, that at the end of the day, that decision boils down to putting trust in your defense. And so if your trust can be so easily shaken in that moment with everything on the line, it's hard for me to see.
Let's take a question here from Pearson. Pearson points something interesting out. Seems like Davante Adams was right. The only team that could beat the Packers was themselves. When the Packers have a night like they did, when so many of their mistakes were self-inflicted, how do they go about addressing those things and improving in the future?
I don't know about you. It's just a different feeling about this team today. Going all the way back to the first third down, when Brady lost that pass, I think it was Mike Evans on Shannon Sullivan, and then they have the opening drive touchdown. Just not the way that you'd think this team would come out in this game. This is a team that's been here, a lot of pieces have been here for 4 of these 7 NFC Championship games. They should know at this point how to come out on this stage, and they were the ones today that got punched in the mouth, just like 16 in Atlanta, just like 19 in San Francisco, and it had that feeling early. Now, they didn't crumble the way that they did in those 2. Maybe being at home helped, but I remember turning to colleague Pete Doherty in the first half and going, this team is afraid of the stage. They kind of played like they were afraid of the stage. I don't think that you got to give the Bucs credit. Obviously, they were relentless in pressuring Aaron Rodgers. Not having David Bakhtiari is a big part of that. They can't control that, the Packers. But a lot of things they could control, including how they came out of the gates, they failed at today.
A lot of you feel the same way over on Facebook, saying that this game wasn't officiated well, that some of the blame deserves to be put on the refs, looking at that Kevin King DPI call at the end of the game to essentially allow the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win it. The Packers defense couldn't come up with a stop and give the ball back to the Packers offense. How much blame does the officiating crew deserve for this loss?
I thought it was a bad call, even with the tug. I thought it was quick enough, and I thought that the ball was uncatchable. First of all, if it's going to be a DPI, it should be a catchable ball. Watching that live and even on replay, I don't see how it was a catchable ball. And if you put it in the context of how the game was officiated, it was very different than how the entire game was officiated. With that said, you cannot in any way point this loss on the officiating. The reality is they put themselves, the Packers, in an 18-point hole early in the third quarter. You don't come back from 18-point holes in a conference championship game, and you especially don't do it against Tom Brady. So, yes, that was a questionable call, but Kevin King mistiming the jump on the first touchdown of the day, Kevin King losing awareness of the situation on the last touchdown of the first half, the fumble from Aaron Jones. There's so many. It should have never gotten to the call. There were so many things the Packers could have done better that should have never gotten to what was, yes, I think, a questionable call.
It's a little bit early to start talking about the draft. However, John wants to have this conversation, and it is a valid conversation. However, we'll have to do some research as the weeks continue and look at what the strengths of this draft are going to be. But John wants to know, what do you think Green Bay should do in the draft this year? Knowing where their deficiencies are currently on this team, what do the Packers need to address early in the draft?
Yeah, John, this is real early for me. I have not thought about the draft at all, but I think that if you're the Packers, you have to feel like you're still not back at square one, but still in a position where you're really thinking about cornerback again, and it feels like that's every single year. Every single year they're thinking about corner, and especially with Kevin King's situation, but even if he comes back, I think you're thinking about cornerback a lot. And I think receiver, look, they don't need a tight end. They got a tight end, Robert Tunney, that's good. This offensive line is going to be very good. Maybe some depth later in the draft, but they've got a good best 5. I could see another running back as well if they lose Aaron Jones, because Matt LaFleurs wants depth for that running game. But I go back to corner. I think that's going to be a need. I mean, the way you lose, the way you end a season usually dictates how you go about addressing your offseason needs. And today, very different. They didn't really struggle against the run today. They gave up 300 yards on the ground like last year. They struggled to cover on the outside. Tom Brady picked on Shannon Sullivan and Kevin King throughout. Those are 2 corners.
This is a conversation we will continue to have as we head into the offseason. It's crazy to say the word offseason now at this point. We are finally here, and we want to thank all of you so much for following along with all of our coverage over on PackersNews.com, all of the daily live streams. It has been a pleasure to interact with so many of you and get to know you all. We really appreciate you joining us. We'll be back later in this week to continue to have these conversations and to look ahead to this offseason, so make sure you come back to Packers News over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. For Ryan Wood,